Hi, my name is Payal Chheda. My Unity ID is Chheda. I'm here to talk about the mini VCL homework using Ansible Vagrant, VirtualBox and phpvirtualbox. So let's begin with the setup. This image indicates the setup of what we are going to do. We have two VMs. One is a config VM. Which is trusty, which is called trusty. It's an Ubuntu 14.04 box, and we have another VM, the server that we're interested in, which is an Ubuntu 16.04 headless server. We call this box Xenial. Now on the trusty box we have Ansible installed, and we have set up the SSH keys such that the trusty box is able to SSH into the Xenial box. This is similar to the exercise in the workshop that we did in class. Now the setup is going to proceed as follows. Once we install Ansible on this and the SSH has been set up successfully, using Ansible playbooks that are on the trusty machine, we are going to run commands in the box, in the Xenial box, and install Vagrant, VirtualBox, phpvirtualbox. And once this is done, we are going to run another playbook which will call Vagrant to provision a virtual machine. The PHP VirtualBox, the URL is directly accessible, and we will access that URL and create a virtual machine manually on our own. With respect to the IP addresses, these boxes have been set up such that the trusty box has an IP address 192.168.33.59, and the Xenial box, which is our server, has been set up with 192.168.33.60 in the same network as this. So now let's begin with the steps that I followed. To begin with, I created the trusty VM with this IP. Now this will serve as our configuration server with Ansible. Next, I created our 16.04 headless server machine, Xenial, with this private IP, that is 33.60. These configurations were made through Vagrant, and hence the changes were made in the Vagrant file, and then I ran Vagrant up to bring up the machines. Similar to the workshop exercise, I set up the SSH keys, basically the private key of the Xenial machine. I copied into the trusty machine and set up the inventory for the trusty machine. Let's look at the inventory once. So we have one node. This is the IP of the Xenial machine. The SSH user is Ubuntu, and the private key file is here, and I've created that key file on the trusty machine already by copying it. Next, the next few steps have been done by SSHing into trusty, which is our 14.04 box. Execute the following steps. One is I ran sudo apt-get update. Next is I installed git, pip, and other Python dependencies for Ansible. So if you can see here, the commands that are mentioned to install Ansible, which is sudo apt-get update, and then sudo apt-get -y install git, and so on. Finally, then I ran pip install Ansible to install Ansible. Next step that I followed was I cloned my own repository, which is this repository that we are looking at right now. I cloned the repository on the trusty machine, and now let's go into the machine and look at what we've done. So here we are inside the trusty machine in the homework 1 folder. Let me just cd, and let me show you the history of commands that are run on this machine. So if you look at history, the initial steps involve setting up the SSH keys and the inventory. The next steps involve setting up Python and its dependencies, and then installing Ansible. After that, I've run git clone and got that folder, and then I've just committed the inventory file. Let me run this Ansible command again. and see what happens. So if we run this command, you see that we get an error which is user bin python was not found. So now let's finally run our run the install.yaml file, which will install first Python on that machine, and after it installs that in raw mode, it will put up gatherfax. Yes, it will set it up, and then we will do the installation of vagrant, virtualbox, and so on. Okay, so let's begin. This is the command to run the install.yaml file. It has two things. -i, with -i I am giving the inventory file, and it also asks for vault password. So I have set up a new VirtualBox user, and for that user the user needed a password, and this password has been encrypted with vault, which is why I have to specify it. So let me run this command. The next thing that it does is it prompts me for the vault password. The vault password is test, so I just add test and I run it. Now if you can see, it's doing all the tasks. The first task is install Python 2. Now that you can see, Python 2 has been installed, and then it's running it's set up gatherfax equal to yes. Now it's installing any other basic utilities like zip command and all that, those modules. As you can see, it's still it's taking a little while to install the utilities in Python and dependencies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video and wait for it to run, and then start it back on again. Now you can see that the Python and dependencies have been installed. Next step, we're downloading Vagrant. We finished downloading Vagrant. Now we will install Vagrant if it's not already been installed. We've successfully installed Vagrant. The next step is to add the VirtualBox to the sources.list, and then add the Oracle public key. Now we are finally going to install VirtualBox 5.0. You can see we managed to install VirtualBox 5.0. We created a new user for VirtualBox. Then we downloaded the extension pack. We checked if that extension pack has been already installed previously or not. Then we started the service if it wasn't started already, the VirtualBox service. The next step that we did is we installed the extension pack if it has not been previously installed. Since it's not been installed previously and this is the first time we're running our script, we can see it changed. The next time we run our script, it will show OK, and since idempotency has been maintained in the script. Now the next step it's doing is installing dependencies for phpvirtualbox. It managed to successfully install the PHP dependencies for VirtualBox. The next step that okay, let's go back. It ran too fast. Yeah. Then it checked if the PHP VirtualBox exists, and it says okay. It wasn't existing, so it downloaded PHP VirtualBox. It renamed the directory. It copied the sample config file. It replaced the username. It replaced the password. The password in the YAML file is encrypted. However, if we look at the PHP config file, it's going to be the plain text password. So the password has been added to the PHP config file. It added the VirtualBox user to that, to the etc default VirtualBox file, and finally it restarted the services, which is VBox Web Service, VBox TRV, and Apache 2. So now if we access the URL, which is 192.168.33.60 PHP VirtualBox, we will be able to bring up the machine. So let me change this to 60. As you can see, it brought up the console web UI. And now I'll just log in with admin password. As you see, this comes up, the UI, and I'll be able to now create a new virtual machine. So let me just select all the default parameters, and here we can see that I was successfully able to create the virtual machine. Now let's go back and provision machine using provision a machine using Vagrant. So I run the similar script, but it's called provision.yaml. Now note that they have been divided into two scripts for reusability sake. So it checks if the VM already exists by checking if the Vagrant file is already there, but since that was not there, it created a new directory for the VM, which created a new directory, and then it ran Vagrant in it in that new directory. The image that we are using is HashiCorp/precise32. Now next step that it's doing is bringing up the new VM. Now we see that the Vagrant has been successfully brought up. So let's SSH into the Vagrant and let's SSH into the VM and see if we've actually been able to bring up the VM. So here I've SSH'd into the Xenial box, which is our 16.04 headless server. If I do an ls, we see a new folder called new VM. This is the folder that we created using provision.yaml. Let me go into new VM and do another ls. We see that there is a Vagrant file. So now let's see if we can do Vagrant SSH from here. So I'll do sudo Vagrant SSH. Now this should log us into the HashiCorp machine. So you can see that it's brought up a different Ubuntu 12.04 LTS. Let me run uname -a. Yeah, we can see that it's a precise32 machine. This is the machine, as I said, HashiCorp/precise32, the VM that we've created inside. Now let's exit and exit out of this as well, and run the scripts again to check for idempotency. So I ran the script again. Meanwhile, let me talk about the best practices followed. Among the best practices followed, all the password has been stored in a hashed form, and it failed waiting for oh, I'm sorry. I think I missed putting the vault password. Yeah, now it's running fine. I missed putting the vault password. Anyway, now it's running idempotently, and as you can see in the background, since the service got restarted, also the URL changed. Anyway, to talk about the best practices followed, one is the scripts have been made idempotent. The other thing is that all the sensitive information like passwords is hashed and encrypted using Vault. Also, we've divided the scripts into two different scripts to ensure reusability. And also minimal use of shell and command module have been made, and the proper modules have been used wherever necessary. So we could see here that when we ran it, only three things changed, which is the service is bringing up and checking if some file is already there, etc. And the remaining steps, they're all just okay and nothing has been changed. This is because of the idempotency. Let me run provision.yaml also again, and you can see that nothing changed because the VM has already been provisioned. So this is how that I'm showing that idempotency is already maintained. If you go to the repository has all the script, the YAML files, which is install.yaml. And it also has provision.yaml file and the inventory file. In the inventory file, note that this is the URL of our other machine, and Ubuntu is the user. That's all. Thank you.